coming for this final closing session where we're going to talk about the future of Black Comm. In the booklet, it also says building the Black Communities Conference. And actually, I see this session as having 3 parts, and 2 actually go together. You can't hear me? Okay, sorry about that. I said I see this session as having 3 parts, and the first 2 are connected. First, we'd just like to share how we built this conference, and part of the reason we want to share it, at least from my perspective, part of the reason we want to share it is because we get asked all the time, we're told all the time about how people are really excited about it, and we get that perpetual question about what we're going to do in the future and when we're going to convene again, or there's the presumption about next year. So we wanted to share how actually we do it so that you too can know how to do it. And that's what's connected to what I see as the second part, which is how could you too build a Black Communities Conference, maybe on a smaller scale if you like, maybe go larger, in your communities. There are other conferences related to ours that are doing that sort of thing, and I think it would be useful for, if people are interested, perhaps knowing how we built it might be a catalyst for people doing it in their own communities. And then the last one is to address that question about what the future of what we've done here actually is. And I know we've kind of been keeping that under lock and key, but we will talk a little bit about that. I also see the second part as one, and maybe the third, as one where we can have a dialogue with you. So thinking about how do you create the Black Communities Conference in your areas. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is that possible? What ideas do you have? Love to your feedback also on what we've done here and that sort of thing. So although we're up here, with a few PowerPoint slides and things like that, I do want this to be also interactive.
No, let's just get into it.
Well, I do have a couple of slides, so I wanted to get to that. And we can skip the first couple. You know what we are doing and what the mission is, so we're always driving home this issue of collaboration. But let's just talk about the creation of it. You know what the key parts are. Hopefully you've sampled a lot of these, the panel discussions, the short talks, workshops, etc. But I want to tell you also, and Mark and I will go back and forth about this, and also feel free, Mark, to add in where I'm missing something. These are 4 key committees that have formed what we do here. So our program committee is what I call maybe our core committee. It's the 2 of us. We represent 2 different institutes at UNC, and then it is somebody from another center at UNC. It's somebody from an office at North Carolina Central, somebody here in the community at the Hayti Heritage Center, and UNC Libraries also. So that group of individuals, 1 person from each of those units, is who makes up our program committee. And we meet monthly and we talk about sort of the nitty-gritty of what we need to do. We sort of have the ideas there, talking about what would we like to see on the program, what's important to know, but sometimes we're getting in the nitty-gritty about, how many sessions should we have, or that sort of question. The planning committee does a lot of, you've seen a lot of people who are here in the red shirts. Cara Stith is one of the co-chairs of the planning committee. Amatullah King, who you've probably seen around, is the other co-chair, and there are other members of that. That's a larger body, and it has people who are students, it has people who are staff members, on and off of our institution. We did think it was important to go outside of UNC to help be collaborative in building this sort of thing. And the planning committee actually does, they're working on the catering, they're working on the organization for securing this space. There's a lot of details about doing that sort of thing. We could even have Cara speak to some of those things if she would like. So there's a lot of that going on. Within that committee, we also had sort of an offshoot, which was a social media committee. That was important for us getting the word out, was that social committee meeting within the planning committee. We have an advisory board of 30-something people who are across the country and the world. They run the gamut from folks at universities to people who are with nonprofits to, I think we have a couple of students on there. there, and also people who represent communities and community organizations are there. We have a call-in with them monthly, and we share with them what the latest update is on our planning, and we get their advice. They're key for helping us get the word out and spreading the call for proposals among their networks, encouraging registration among their networks and that sort of thing. So we rely on them both for advising and thoughts about what we're doing, but also helping to get the word out. And the selection committee is made up of 30 people, maybe?
I think it was a little less this year. I think we had like 20,
Okay.
20 this year.
Maybe 20-something people. A lot of students on that, but also staff members at UNC. We put a call out. It's a voluntary position, and those are the people that selected the proposals. They go through and they rate each proposal that we receive, and and then we have a meeting where we go through those ratings and we select which proposals will actually be accepted to be on this program here. So what did I miss that you would like to fill in?
So I don't think you missed anything here. Maybe one thing I'll add is just some of the kind of conceptual things before we got to, like, because this is sort of in operating mode, all the things that are happening. But two things that happened at the beginning, like before the 2018 conference. One was just putting a document together that got longer and longer as it went, but a document that sort of set out what the mission was. And so early on, the desire initially to have these kind of collaborations between communities and universities, even just getting that language right. So there was a group of us kind of sending words around. Even I remember the discussion we had with the program committee last year about the name. Amar Kshetra and who's left UNC now? Brian, about the ordering of the words, and you know, it was a conversation about getting all that right. And so while that's sort of set now, I think those kinds of conversations, even though we're small, were really important to get everyone on the same page before we tried to figure out how to operationalize everything. And then one other thing I'll throw out there that doesn't necessarily apply to other organizations or goals, but for us it really was important, is what does Black communities mean? And so we decided not to define it, but we did decide to be very proactive about trying to get the word out and identify people. And so again, something that we benefited from a lot this year was a lot of work and hours of work study students and other people the first time around to just find people. And so we just made lists. I remember we had, let's list all the different, we thought about communities and we thought about academia, right? So we said, let's list all the Black communities in the world, like geographic, which, you know, we never knew you can't do it, but you got to start. It's a place to start, because at least in my mind, what this could be like, we can have like 10 million people here, right? But you got to start somewhere. And so we said, okay, let's have a list of all the US states. Let's have a list of countries that have large diasporic populations. Let's have a list. Initially, in 2018, we did not have a big outreach to the African continent, so it was really the Americas. And we had work study students that were just like, okay, first list all of the geographic communities where there's lots of Black people. And then the next phase was find some community leaders in those places and just fill out, and get emails or phone. I remember we had students doing phone calls just to let people know and get information to them. And then on the academic side, remember we created a list of what are all the academic disciplines that have something to do with Black communities. And that's kind of all of them. But we got to start with a list, right? So we made a list, and then we said, well, what are the journals that people publish in sociology and music and anthropology and business? And then we said, okay, lovely work study students, can you go to each of these journals and do a word search for Black town, African American, Africana, African descent, these different keywords? And again, back to the spreadsheet. Carla hates the spreadsheets. That's probably why she left this part out. Just go in and just put in all those people in their contact information. And so what we have now is, I think 6,000 email addresses of people around the world that at least know something about, hopefully if they read their email, know something about the conference. And we now, it gets larger and larger, but like it was a lot of hours of people to put that stuff together, so.
So if you go as large as we did, I do not recommend the spreadsheet. Yes, that has been the bane of my existence. On the conceptual issue, though, I wanted to admit something. So we're both connected to a university, and so when we're thinking about collaboration, we have been thinking about university-community partnerships. But when we put the call out for proposals, what we received was beyond just university-community dyads, connections. And it's become much more than that. I think the collaboration issue is still really key here, but as we think about sort of, encouraging you to consider a Black Communities Conference or gathering in your areas, it doesn't have to be a university-community partnership. Well, it can be whatever you like, but I wanted to acknowledge that it's become more than that just by virtue of what we received and who has come here. I personally still think the collaboration and the connections is still a really important piece of what we're doing, and university community connections are a big part of what is represented here, but it is not all of it, and I see so many possibilities around that personally. So, let's see what else we have here. So we already mentioned, I think Mark just actually went over this, all the different ways that we got the word out about this. Social media has been really big for us. We've been more active on Twitter, a little bit on Instagram. I think it's safe to say Facebook has not been very active for us. That might be, we've done some, but it might be just a result of what we already were engaging ourselves. My institute, we were mostly active on Twitter, so that was an easy, seamless transition for us. We talked about doing the mailings and tapping into some of the listservs and things like that. I think you've seen some of these numbers in the program booklet, so just so you know, all we did, 6,000 names, of course, that's not insignificant, but all we did was put the proposals, call for proposals out, and just, when we didn't know, when we started, Mark was talking about, yeah, we're gonna get 200 plus people, and I'll admit I was quite skeptical, and then it exceeded, the expectations for me, for sure, and I'm thinking that also for Mark. But so it's been impressive that we've had these numbers, and people always tell us how impressive it is, but we just put the word out, and people just really connected with it and responded. So I think that's been really great. This is for 2019. I don't have the numbers for 2018. I just thought it might be useful for you to see, again, thinking about when we put it out, who comes here. It makes perfect sense that we have higher numbers in North Carolina. It's an easier travel and just networks and things like that. So you can see that is represented. We also have higher representation in the South, but I'm really personally impressed that we have this number of states represented and now a number of countries as well. And I was just talking with somebody in the hallway a little bit earlier, and she was saying that, she was impressed that she was meeting people from California and Texas, and she said, that's an example. If you're willing to travel that far, then this is something that really matters to you, that really is attractive to you, and I think that speaks to this also.
Yeah, and I think those just are, those are probably 2018 for the states, and so I think we have a couple more states that are.
Yeah. What's not represented here is outside of the U.S. This time, I think we had close to, 30 people from outside the U.S., and we had folks from West Africa. I don't think anybody from East Africa, Latin America, Caribbean, Europe. So, had a good representation. Excuse me? And Canada and Mexico, North America. Sorry about that. All right, so maybe this is the discussion part. You too can create a BlackCom. I brought this up, I mentioned it to Mark because there's this conference maybe some of you have heard of at Harvard called the Black in Design Conference. Anybody heard of it? We were actually in competition with them this year because I think their conference is about 10 days to 2 weeks away, and I know some people who said they were going to that and couldn't come to ours. They have a different premise, but it still is focused on Black people and community issues. And out of that conference, which I think started maybe 4 years ago, and they have it every other year, they have had some spin-offs, and they have, it's called Black in Design, but they have had spin-offs of smaller gatherings that are local, sort of community related. So there's something called Black Space Oklahoma and Black Space New York and other parts of the United States. So that's where I got this idea that what if that were to happen for us too? And so I guess I just want to throw that out there and see your thoughts on it and hear some possibilities.
Yeah, maybe just one thing I add, after last year, there were a couple of people that we talked with who were interested in doing things, particularly in North Carolina, in different locations. And is Chanel Nestor, is she here? So there was actually, she was a young woman who was a presenter last year who started a conference, actually inspired by our conference in 2018. And she was particularly interested in Black farmers, but then also Black folks who are doing extension. So this is, every state in the US has agricultural extension agents, and so trying to increase the community of Black agricultural extension agents seems kind of boutique kind of thing, but it was, she put on a really successful conference, and some of our conversations with her were really helpful. And I remember she came to us probably almost about a year ago, and talked about the idea of sort of satellite conferences across North Carolina leading up to this one, and that was just too much to consider in terms of our time. But yeah, there's lots of kind of people interested in pieces of this, and I've had a couple conversations, someone in Miami, someone in Rocky Mount, someone in Venezuela, someone in Nigeria, who are all interested in some version type conference that has a similar flavor.
Yeah, so we'd love to hear your thoughts on that and also take questions from you as well.
I have a question. You guys have speak on fundraising and how do you set prices for registration, exhibitors and such? How do you guys?
So there's a second question, which is how much does everything cost, which maybe we'll get to. But in terms of registration specifically, so there was a big change from last year and this year in terms of how we structured the prices and stipends and all these kinds of things. And so where we are currently is the cost to attend is, if you register early, is basically the cost of the breakfast and maybe a t-shirt. So it's extremely sub. So the cost of the space, the cost of, none of that is included. So the change from last year was that last year the prices were higher, but then we offered scholarships. And it was just, in terms of the time and going back and forth, it was cumbersome and a lot of time on our staff's time to handle that process. And so we said, well, let's drastically cut the price and not have stipends for the average participant separate from speakers. And so that really resonated with people and seemed to work. Is that most of the question? And fundraising in general. So I'll speak to maybe about last year, and then I don't know if you want to speak to this year. So last year, we were able to, both years we were able to raise enough money to cover our costs. So I'll just say that. In terms of the process of reaching out to organizations and companies to support us, it was a kind of, we were successful at it. I guess maybe what do you want to know? Like who do we ask, or how do we choose? Yeah.
How do you
Yeah, yeah. So it gets two parts. One is back to lists, right? So there's a long list of, at least on our side, because we split this up a little bit. In terms of like corporate sponsors, we had a long list, and the list was people we had a relationship with, people we thought maybe had cared something about Black communities. We also had companies up there that have had trouble. So we had Starbucks up there. And we got close to good conversations, and then I guess it was far enough after their incident that they were like, okay, we don't need to worry about it anymore. The reach out included like a letter. We try to find the person in the organization. So there's a pretty detailed conversation. So you need to find, if it's on a corporate side, you need to find the right person in that organization to talk to, who makes those decisions. And that can be a process. It can take time. So sometimes it's finding, is there an alumni of the organization or some connection to somebody in that organization you can talk to and identify that person. Some companies, those people are easily identifiable. American Underground, which is the organization here in Durham, had a conversation with Doug Spate, who used to work over there, and he introduced me to the person at Coastal Federal Credit Union that makes those decisions. And so it's just a lot of talking to find those people. Once you find the right person, it's pretty, we send them the information and they say, we like this or we don't, and it's a pretty straight. The hardest part is, on the corporate side, is finding the actual right person to talk to.
So, also, we're from a large university, and so we went to some of the offices within the university, the chancellor's office, the provost's office. Those are the large offices at the university. But then we also went to the small units, the Department of Anthropology, the Department of Sociology. So we just went around the university asking for support. We also went to local universities as well. So Duke is a sponsor, North Carolina Central is a sponsor. You saw yesterday at the plenary, NC State is a sponsor. All of those universities were represented. So I think those are other things. Also, our advisory board members who represent different types of organizations, that's a good way to get support. Bring people into your planning team or your advisory board, and the organizations that they represent are likely willing to support because they know one of their staff members is playing a big role in this event. And it's good for them to also be supportive of this kind of an event. We also went to the city of Durham. This year we went to the city of Durham, and there are a number of units at the city of Durham that are also supporting us. The Hayti Heritage Center, which is on our programming team, they also were supporting us. I think it's also important to mention that we have the staff support, so there's a lot of in-kind support that doesn't come into the actual dollars that come in, but it really—
That's probably the largest cost.
It really is, and it is it's really, really important because the labor that goes into building this thing is, we haven't calculated that, but I don't know if we can count that high. I also wanted to acknowledge that part of what has made this successful is that we provide funding for people to get here. We knew that we weren't going to have this level of participation if we didn't provide financial support for people to travel. People who are coming from small communities where they don't have access to the funds to be able to get a plane ticket from Texas to get here. So we have supported a lot of people, and a lot of the folks who are coming from outside of the United States, for sure, we've been financially supporting. So that's what a lot of our fundraising goes into also. The funds that we raise also go into supporting just the participation. And I think that's something that, it'd be interesting to think about whether that kind of would be necessary for a local event.
And just one other thing on the fundraising side, whoever it is you're asking money from or support, because support doesn't necessarily have to be money. For example, the city of Durham, some of our volunteers, we got parking passes, right? So the city can provide us parking passes, right? Getting to a point where you can clearly articulate what it is that you're doing to someone who doesn't know that they even could care yet. Right, so you, in sort of verbally, but then also very succinct communications, email, pamphlets, and things like that when you're fundraising and speaking. So one way to think about it is having some visual aid that has some pictures, is very clear, short paragraph, bullet points, what it is that you're doing and the outcomes, and then the communication to that potential sponsor or funder is tailored to what it is that they do that's directly connected to what you're doing. So Google, for example, is one of our sponsors. So we have this one page that's pictures and things, and then say like, dear so-and-so and so, we believe that Google would want to partner with us on this conference because Google is interested in how technology impacts communities. And as the number of people of African descent and minorities in general, non-white people in general increase, something, trying to figure out what is the way that what they do and their business directly connects to the themes of what it is that you're doing, so that they would read it as like, oh, okay, yeah, we care about that, and then you can have a conversation into it. It requires you to leave behind why you may be doing something and speak to why someone else should be interested in it and be comfortable with that. Because you can't, the reason I care about it, I can't assume anyone else cares about it for the same reason, but I need their money. So what about what I'm doing are they interested in? If there's nothing, then they're not going to be a sponsor, so it's a waste of time. But if there's some part of that, I need to find what that is, articulate it clearly, succinctly, in language that they use, maybe even quoting things off of their website, and keep the conversation to that, and then they'll be really excited about it too.
Yes. I didn't hear the question. Maybe we should start using the mics because I'm sure everybody else
Would you
didn't
repeat
hear.
the question?
Yeah, so I believe she is asking if we're willing to share templates or examples of letters to sponsors and all that type of material, and the answer is yes.
Yes. Including what? Oh, including in kind.
So let's estimate here. Not including in kind, I'm thinking the expenses to put the conference on are probably around $120,000. Including in kind, they're, I don't know, maybe $400,000,
Maybe.
something like that.
Yeah. We haven't even calculated overtime.
Yeah. And then there's additional things like volunteers who are volunteering their time, so we won't include that. But so in terms of some budgeting and scales of things, I think so Carla mentioned, for example, like the in-kind time. So one way to think about that too is one of the benefits of being at a large university is if they are supportive, then the structure allows for something like this. And that's kind of one of the things that came across in a lot of the sessions, at least I attended, at least the things I talked about. If you're a community organization, you're doing things, and you're reticent about having a partnership with the university, I understand that, but there's a resource there, and if you can figure out how to access it, it can be tremendous for you. So it would be helpful to know kind of what type of organization you're from. Is it just you? Like, is this something you need to pull salary from for yourself, or like what's?
We're a CDC in Birmingham, we're situated with a lot of universities, University of Miles, UAB, plays in Birmingham Southern, but just really interested to understand like what are the scales of being able to execute the concept from average $500,000 from the city folks to the CDC. So my SC is really because we would envision it have to be a partnership.
When you say put on Black Com, are you suggesting that you're moving this around, or saying put on your own that includes your?
I meant put on your own. However, there have been times where we thought about, could it go somewhere else? Not that we would take it ourselves there, but we would see if somebody in Los Angeles wanted to put it on, and we would do what we're doing now, which is share the model and work with them to be able to do that. We have talked about that, not recently in my recollection. So really what I was talking about here was more you put it on from your organization, your company, whatever.
One thing I'll add in terms of the cost. So there's some things that we did that were a little labor intensive, but were very cost saving. And so one of those is on the advertising side.
Yes, it was.
So I know I'm going to talk about the spreadsheets again. So I don't think we've spent a single dollar in advertising.
Wow. Because it would have cost a lot.
Yeah.
I've done 4 conferences, Minnesota Malcolm conferences. The last conference that I did, me and my best friend executed the whole conference by ourselves. I would never do nothing like that again. And so when you're doing conferences, you're doing it for free. It's free to the public. You're not getting paid to do it. You don't have the resources. And so I've done conferences where I didn't have these wonderful resources that you guys have, and they were so successful. It's back up how much you want to do it up, and marketing does cost a lot. You know, like y'all programs, everything is beautiful, and I didn't know what to expect when I came down here, but the first thing I thought of was, oh my God, marketing. This is amazing. This is beautiful, and I know if anybody did have to pay for that, it would have been on the left. And so I feel like you have to make your mind up of how you want your program is going to be, if you want to give out bags, what marketing looks like, because a lot of people still don't know.
Yeah.
So you can cut costs.
And so to speak that, I mean, one person, I'll just say his name is Jack Walker. He's an introvert who's an IT guy in where I work, but he's really good at design. And he and I and Carla would sit down and talk about ideas about the format, so all the programs and the website. I mean, that's him. And he's internal. So again, like that flexibility we have at the universities, we have people who he's probably over the past year, 5% of his time over the past year probably has been spent like designing, doing stuff for this conference. But our the people that pay us are willing so far to let this happen. One thing to the question about when we say your own Black comm, so I'll specifically speak to a couple of council members from the town of Rocky Mount that I spoke to, I think yesterday. I don't think they're here. So, oh, you're here. Okay, yeah. So, hello. I don't want to. Maybe you why don't you speak to what we talked about yesterday and your ideas about.
Can we get them to go to the mic, because we can't hear you at all?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
And I'm waiting my turn right here. So after that, I'm ready.
are you willing to speak to it? You can. Okay.
Yeah,
While you're
can you
making
go
your
to
way
it?
up,
Yeah.
why don't we have?
And for other people,
There's a mic on that side.
if anyone else has questions or comments, so you can line up at the mic like we do at the other plenaries.
You can go ahead while she's walking.
Oh, sure. So I came in a little late because I was dealing with a little situation, and I don't know if it happened yet, but I wanted to make sure you and the volunteers were all given your due and applause for this work. Well, and that's just the beginning, because you deserve so much more. So I've been working in conference planning for a good part of almost 20 years, and in the past 5 years I've been working for Black folk and convenings and philanthropy with the Association of Black Foundation Executives. And so it's not an easy task. I hear all these questions around starting a conference and creating a conference. 3,000 people, from 3,000 to 400 people, it's all hard, and it takes so much. And so my concern, since I'm just finding out about this, and to your point around the idea that you didn't do any advertising, someone sent our CEO a message and said, you all need to come to this conference in North Carolina. And that's why myself and my colleague, we submitted a session. Thank you for accepting it. And that's why we're here. And we were already talking about the idea of how, we need to have more staff from our team, and it's a small team, but to come down and have this experience and let other people know about this, because there was so much Black brilliance in this conference.
Yes, yes.
It was medicine for my spirit.
Yes, it was, yeah.
And I'm just thinking, you sister, how you had to handle that situation. The fact that you brought the Haiti folks in, but then still had to deal with the challenges that were real time as far as, the idea of translation. And then the other issues as it relates to maybe dealing with disability issues and other things. There's so much that goes into this that it's hard to meet, and that you all met and got us to this point. Bravo. My concern is this happening next year? Because I'm already going to make my reservations. I want to make sure I'm here. So we need to your point about creating, the Black we need to have these conversations in our communities. We need to be doing this and pulling together the brilliance that's in all of our communities. And then we come together. I've already told you, I think I may have told both of you, our conference is going to be in Raleigh, April 16th through the 18th next year. And the only reason we can't get here is because Duke is taking over everything that same weekend with their homecoming and what have you. But we want to be back here and celebrate from urban to rural, all the Blackness when we come together, and then want to come back here again and be here for this. So make it happen.
There was no question, so you don't have to answer anything. I think we have something.
Hold on. Well, I do just want to say, though, I appreciate the applause and the love, quite honestly. But I really feel, quite honestly, that we couldn't do this without you. What you see, all this Black brilliance, that's you, right? And we just, yes, we did a lot of work. I'm not gonna suggest that we did not. However, if you didn't give us what you gave us, this would not be what it is. So the energy in the room and the content, we did not mastermind the content. We didn't shape it. We didn't say, oh, we want this kind of presentation. We want this topic covered. We gave you what you gave us. So it's a collective effort. And that's what I think is so beautiful about this, is it's another form of collaboration right here. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, well, we are very excited. That's why we are wanting to do one ourselves next year. I'm Lois Watkins, and I'm City Council, City of Rocky Mount. And I'm sure those of you who are from Durham is aware of what we're dealing with in Rocky Mount with gentrification and, the fight for power, because we are a majority African-American controlled council. And so this year, we really became bold with our city budget. And so most of what's in the budget is focused towards working families and inner city neighborhoods. And so what we're finding is that our people really need to build support, to build collaboration and training. And so we came to this conference. And so what you've shown us in the last 3 days is exactly what we need to do. And we understand that we cannot start at this level. But the plan would be to do it in partnership with the city government. And so therefore, we probably will not have a lot of issues around, budget, because I can't speak for the city manager, but I think the other majorities, council members on the council will be in agreement with this kind of effort. And so that's pretty much what we want to do, is to do what you've done here, start it on a smaller level and then grow. And then also those who emerge as leaders in that, then bring them back here next year. Hopefully you'll be having it, and then so they can become more exposed to it. And then we just continue to build on it. That's what we want to do. All right. Thank you.
Now, I just thought of a topic for you to have in a session next year. And it's a how-to, so that people can go through and not necessarily use a spreadsheet, but be able to say step 1, step 2, step 3. And so, because that's the one thing that I run into with conferences or even sessions, meetings and such, small, or even if it's a 1 or 2 day sort of thing that people have put together, I've not experienced the the word that came out was the quality of the energy and the camaraderie that is put together in these 3 days. And when you have a conversation with somebody on yesterday, and they said that, well, when we met such and such a time, I said, no, that was yesterday. And because everything was so filling. And that's where I think a lot of people may need a tutorial, not a session where you tutor how to have a successful experience or conference. Just an idea, just a proposal.
Hi, I'm representing St. Louis, Missouri, and I want to just say thank you all for giving me and Temple of Praise Ministries the opportunity we gave a workshop. It was our first time giving a workshop at a conference, and I would say is that we're ready for next year.
Hello. Part of the planning committee, my partner in crime is Cara Stith, who's sitting in the front. I wanted to open up the question about the idea. I've heard a lot of people who want to do a conference, and I think sometimes when you see the very polished, hopefully, part at the end, to understand the teamwork, the conversations that started from an idea. A lot of times ideas are great and they die and they don't happen. This happened twice, so if the organizers can talk on that part, because I think mostly what stops us is that we fear that we can't do it. So.
So I'll try to talk briefly about sort of the genesis of the space that the idea was created in. I'll put it that way, because like Amatilla said, it didn't start with this idea. So I'll call it two people, Bill Ferris and Everett Fly, who came together. One was a community leader, one was an academic, and I was pulled into hosting a day-and-a-half workshop that occurred in Chapel Hill for the mayors of 8 historic black towns in the South. 5 of them were outside of North Carolina, 3 of them were inside of North Carolina. And it was a day and a half of workshops for those mayors on topics mostly related to historic tourism and how they could use tourism to bring in dollars into their communities, but also a couple sessions on health and archiving and things like that. It went well. It created some lasting collaborations between those particular towns and the history department, actually, at UNC. So we started sending PhD students down to help those communities collect histories and learn archiving practices so they could archive materials in their communities. So after that, a group of us, Carla and myself and others, started meeting and thinking through ways that we could elevate the way that UNC supports not just those 8 historic black towns, but black communities defined broadly. And so the first idea that we had was a clearing, I almost forgot the word, even though it's right, was a clearinghouse, a digital space where communities could post essentially things that they needed, places to collaborate, areas where they needed collaboration, and academics, again, it could be anywhere, right, anywhere in the world. Academics that had those skills or research partnerships, let's say public health. So there's a community that really wanted to figure out why so many men were getting prostate cancer in their black community. And there was a public health person who studied that work, and a clearinghouse to get those people. It seems like a great idea, doesn't it? Okay, yeah, let's do that. Oh. So maybe you should do it. So we had lots of conversations and workshopping, and we brought people in to talk about it and various things, and we eventually decided that maybe it could work, but the time and resources to make it work well, it just wasn't. Well, we didn't even decide that yet. We still were hopeful, but we said, well, let's have a conference to help us figure out if that could work. That was actually, I'm thinking about it, that was actually let's have a conference to understand from communities and from academics what kind of online platform would work. to get people collaborating. You look like you want to jump
And
in.
also, I think, and he's absolutely right, and also we thought we'll have this conference, and then we'll get a greater sense of what the interest is in this kind of idea, this clearinghouse, and what kind of topics people want to collaborate around and that sort of thing. So the first conference was supposed to be the meeting space or the event to help build this clearinghouse. It's safe to say, I mean, and this is a good example of how it's not always all beautiful. There are some stumbles along the way. We had some focus groups in the summer, almost immediately after. So last conference was in April. We had some focus groups. We pulled some people who had actually been on the program from here who were local, and we started having some discussions with them about this clearinghouse idea, and we got actually more specific about it. And that was where we learned that for some of the folks, they weren't interested and it wasn't going to work, especially for some of the folks from the small communities. They felt like, we're not going online to go look in this kind of way. They just didn't feel like this was a useful way for them. And some of them even felt like technologically it just wasn't going to be possible. So that's when we realized this isn't actually going to work, and that's how 2019 came about. So we need another error for 2019 to get us to 2020. Not really.
Hello, James Benderson from the town of Eatonville. First, I want to thank you for explaining to everyone how we all got to this point. But my primary question is this. As you recommended that we recreate this or duplicate this in other parts of our own communities, what types of acknowledgement would you like for these different communities to do when duplicating this conference?
Can you repeat that? What kind of acknowledgement would we like for what?
For these various communities to do, what would you like for us to, if this town or this community say we want to do this conference, how would you like us to include you guys or acknowledge the fact that we all came here and we're reduplicating this that was started here?
I guess I'll say, and you may have a different thought about that. I don't know that I thought that that was a goal for us. I mean, it's you know, when I see what people are saying about us on social media and things like that, that's wonderful. But I don't know that I thought about what we want people to do for us necessarily. I appreciate the gesture and the thought about it, and that's more about the energy that is here. But I don't know. Do you have other thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, it would, if you can give me a complimentary registration at your conference, that would be nice. But no, I think just if you do something that is inspired by, you know, in whatever, when you're talking about it, if you say it was inspired by, I mean, that's good. And let us know just so when because as Carlos said, you know, the type of collaboration that we want to support has grown. And so we're very interested in trying to keep track of what types of new partnerships and collaborations happen or inspired by connections and people meeting here. And so not even beyond just doing another conference or a different conference, just if you meet people here who you start working with, we want to know about that. And so there's a survey, and we're going to send out a link to an online version, and we're really very, very interested in keeping track of that. And so whether or not you know, give us credit or anything like that, that's less important. What's more important is that you just let us know so that we can know the impact that we've hopefully been able to have.
Absolutely.
And I'll say even more specifically, if you, it depends on what kind of help you need. But if you need help, also just ask. And so, you know, in our structure, we had like an advisory board, for example. And so it's possible that some members of our team might have time to be on an advisory board of something you might be doing. And so I would say just ask. Someone else asked about like the materials, for example. That's something that I'm happy to share. I say, yes, we can do that, absolutely. So any things like that, happy to talk about and share.
Well, you answered my question. So if we have an idea and we want to implement it, it's related, but it's not maybe one of the topics, and we want to implement it somewhere else, we could come to you for a little information, a little help.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Actually, there's a woman who was at the conference last year, and she was here this year, but maybe 2 months ago, she sent me an email, and she was very interested in having a conference for K through 12 girls who are interested in STEM and programming and things like that, but kind of in the local area. So different, kind of connected, and she came over, we sat down and talked, I introduced her to a couple of people, and we're going to talk again, so happy to help in whatever way we can.
I think this is my last question, but number one, I just want to reiterate the concept of this is so powerful, and I think what some of the other folks were saying is that, like, similar to other, idea conferences like TED and stuff, like there's an opportunity for like universal branding, but independently organized stuff. But my question is like, what I found so powerful, and I think I mentioned this to Ms. Slocum, is that you had community folks, practitioners, PhDs, and it was truly inclusive. And it was also very inclusive of disciplines. But I'm wondering, have you all considered the opportunity to maybe develop tracks or summits within the conference, when you're talking about Black communities? So for example, like, you have all these historic Black commercial districts, you've got urban planners, you've got folks in community health, you've got all these sort of specific disciplines that, especially given the bar graph you just gave, like, it becomes not just a convening of ideas and academics, but you also know that you'll be able to network with those specific academicians in that field from across the spectrum of Black communities in the state. So I wonder if you had considered that opportunity.
Yeah. So in terms of like tracks and things like that, right, by discipline. So we had lots of conversations about different iterations of that. So in 2018, we thought about it, and it never quite actualized. This year, the way we handled that was with these little images on the icons. And I know it's, we had the stuff online and it's sometimes it takes some time to learn, but we had on the website, you could essentially experience the agenda by topic, and so you could make your own track, essentially. We had a lot of conversations in 2018 about what should we have, like this one room is like all the history related content is in this one room all through the day, and we decided not to do that because we didn't want people to be isolated. And so if you wanted to do that, you had to actively choose, okay, now I have to get up, I have to go over here to see the next history talk, now I have to get up and go to here to see it. So that was a conscious choice in terms of the physical space throughout the day. But when this happens again, when the conference happens again, and let's say it happens again 10 years from now, and it's enormous. Like tens of thousands of people. Then there's things we might think about along the lines of what you're talking about.
Well, but I'm glad that you answered that because I thought if I asked internally myself if that was a conscious decision to keep it truly interdisciplinary and force people to collaborate across disciplines, and I think that's a part of the power of the conference, right? Like I ran into an urban ecologist, right? So thanks for that. Yeah.
We were also more thoughtful this time because we learned from the first time about making sure that all of the sessions related, so not just in the same room, but also at the same time, because if you're interested in health, for example, you don't want to have all the health at the same time and then you have to choose which one to go to. So we tried to make sure we spread that out. So we tried to do that more. I feel like we've been evasive about this future, and if the burning question, Mark just alluded to the next one or when, so that's a signal. What I have said is that I would like for there to be a third one. I feel confident it's not going to be in 2020. I'm sorry to disappoint you. It takes a year to build this thing, and I'm not starting tomorrow to get going on the next one. I'm sorry. So I think 2021, maybe early 2021 is a more likely thing that I personally can see. But I will admit, there is a lot of, we have other things that we do in our job. This is, I don't know, from our employer's perspective, maybe not even the biggest one. And so there's a lot to work out, but I can say that we hear you about your interest, and that is a motivator for me to want to do something. And I'd like to say that I would like for there to be a third one, but you'll have to stay tuned about when that will be and what exactly it will look like the third time. What would you like to say?
I agree.
Well, thank you very, very, very much.